everybody.
Hello.
Hello and welcome to the SLC Theater production of Agatha by Zoe Stanton-Savitz, directed by Michelle Carter-Cram. Before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge that the Sarah Lawrence Theater program works, learns, and lives on the land of Lenape people. We pay respect to Lenape ancestors past, present, and future. Agatha is part of our new work series, which runs 2 original student works in rep. Emergency exits are located through the door where you entered, to your right, and straight through the back of the theater. Please take a moment to identify your exit path in the unlikely event of an emergency. Agatha runs approximately 50 minutes. Content warnings for this performance are mentions of death and suicide and consumption of alcohol. At this time, please turn off all noise-making devices. Thank you, and please enjoy the performance.
Presumed murdered. Archibald Christie determined suspects in the case of the missing novelist. Did her husband cause the disappearance of Agatha Christie? Christ, Arthur. Look at what they're writing about me.
I'm thinking, Archie.
I didn't kill her, Arthur. I can't have the whole world presuming I killed my wife.
I know, Archie.
We're running out of time. It's been 11 days and the police have nearly given up hope.
I know, Archie.
My reputation is hanging by a thread.
I know, Archie. Now will you hush up and let me think?
10 days, a crock of bogies, some useless hounds, and all they found is that damn car. They're couple of bottles of opium.
I'm doing everything I can to absolve you, Archie. There's just so little evidence.
They're saying it's foul play. They're saying I killed her.
Did you?
Of course! She's my wife, for goodness sake.
All right. Let me think.
Would you think a bit faster?
Excuse me, gentlemen. I'm sorry to interrupt. Mr. Christie, Rosalind and I are doing French lessons, and she's just asked how to say the word killer.
Meurtrier.
Thank you.
Who's that?
Miss Fisher is Rosalind's governess, Agatha's secretary.
Have you spoken to her about Agatha?
Why, Charlotte? Oh, she's a Lilliputian weakling. Insignificant to the case.
You saying she's yet to be questioned?
I suppose.
Well, go and get her, Archie. Rosalind will be all right on her own. It's only for a minute.
Would you kindly pull your head from your arse, Arthur? What good will speaking with Miss Fisher do?
Don't you see, Archie? She could be the missing piece. We've got to speak with her.
No, I don't see how it could help.
Don't you trust me, Archie?
You're not even a real detective. You're just an upstage snob with an affinity for words.
I'm a mystery writer, Archie. That makes me an expert.
Your gumshoeing has got us nowhere.
Not yet, but I've got a good feeling about that secretary. She might have some helpful clues. She was quite close with Miss Christie, was she not?
Yes, they are friends.
I must speak with the secretary.
All right.
Cigarette.
Thank you.
Doesn't smell right, Archie. This whole affair, there's something fishy.
Oh, my life is a misery.
Speaking of which.
I'm sorry, Mr. Christie. Was that a joke at my expense?
Sorry?
Fisher?
Oh, no, Miss Fisher, just an expression.
It's quite funny though.
Yes. Miss Fisher, this is Mr. Doyle.
I'm pleased to meet you, sir.
And you, Miss Fisher.
He's here to aid us in our search for Agatha. He'd like to ask you a few questions about Mrs. Christie.
You don't think I had something to do with it, because I wouldn't.
Miss Fisher, there's no need to fret. I'm not accusing you of anything. Just yet.
I'm sorry to ask, but could you be quick, Mr. Doyle? I fear Rosalind is not taking the disappearance of her mother with much grace. Why, I woke from a nap this afternoon and she was simply staring as I slept.
I assure you, you're not in any trouble. You were quite close with Miss Christie?
We had an intimate relationship, yes, and in fact I was shocked she didn't return after her letter.
The letter?
Mrs. Christie left me a letter before she vanished.
A letter? Why did you keep this from me, Miss Fisher?
I'm sorry, Mr. Christie. I thought you knew.
It's
so
all right,
sorry.
Charlotte. Just retrieve the letter for
I didn't
us.
mean to keep anything from Mr. Christie. I miss Mrs. Christie so deeply, and I've never wanted
Charlotte,
to...
the letter!
Yes, Mr. Christie.
Silent kitten, isn't she?
She's just shaken up. Agatha was her only friend, you know. Now all she's got for company is Rosalind, and her thoughts aren't very profound.
How old is Rosalind?
7.
Not a suspect, I suppose.
Arthur! She can barely lift a spoon!
It's unfortunate, isn't it? We've been so excited to discover an additional suspect.
Dilly-dallying, my job, my fortune, my very life is at stake!
Passing through these clues takes time, Archie.
I cannot be thought of as a murderer. I am a respectable man.
You've got to calm down, Archie.
Calm down? How can I calm down? Christ, Arthur, we've got to stop dawdling and do something.
All right, Archie. I'm at my wit's end, but since you're near hysterical, there's one more idea we haven't tried.
What is that, then?
Might I borrow your telephone? I'll ring up a friend of mine. I believe she could be a great help.
What friend?
Just a local medium she can communicate with.
The dead! The dead! Agatha isn't dead, Arthur! Do you think she's dead?
I'd like to find out.
The telephone was in that nook.
Madam Marilyn Egg, please. Thank you. Why, hello, Madam Egg. Oh, how did you know I would call? Oh, of course. Listen, I've been called upon to help investigate the mysterious disappearance of a young writer. I was wondering if you'd come down to Sunningdale to help me find a glove. Why, sure, a glove. Yes. Style South Center. Oh, of course you can find it on your own. Yes, thank you.
Here it is, Mr. Doyle.
Goodbye, Madam Egg, and thank you, Miss Fisher.
Do you think you'll find her, Mr. Doyle? I've been ever so lonely without her. Mrs. Christie was my dearest friend, and I was dreadfully. Rosalind has been so difficult. Why, she won't sit down to even a second, and why, she keeps offering me champagne with cyanide.
That will be all, Charlotte.
I am sorry, Mr. Christie.
Dainty handwriting. That's a sign of a genius.
Is your writing dainty?
Oh, no, my handwriting is much more masculine.
A sign of confidence, I suppose.
Hardly. A sign of fragility. A writer should have the humility to be stupid. He should not be a genius. Only his characters.
Why?
A character must speak for the writer. A writer must stay out of the way. Say nothing.
Oh, why, this letter tells us nothing we don't already know.
Quite at a loss, Archie. To tell you the truth, I'm about to write What was that?
Charlotte, are you alright? Charlotte, what is it?
There's
Speak it out!
a man!
Charlotte, what man?
Seems as if she's fainting.
I can see that, Arthur.
Miss, I'm not going to hurt you, and
Who are you? What are you doing in my house?
your house.
Honey,
do you get inside? I didn't hear the door open.
I came in through a second-story window.
That's why? Because he's a robber, of
I
course.
assure you
If
I-
I leave my house, I shall ring up the
Just! I'm a detective.
A detective.
Detective Hercule Poirot, here to solve the case of the missing Agatha Christie.
Who are you?
You are the husband, I suppose.
Yes, Archibald.
You? A cousin, perhaps? A friend? Another detective?
You haven't heard of me.
Should I have?
I'm quite well known.
Oh.
Arthur Conan Doyle.
I am sorry, sir, that name means nothing to me.
Listen to this second! Don't you know I created a world-famous franchise? You may have heard of Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, I'm quite an admirer of Mr. Holmes.
Yes, well, recently my writing has shifted away from Sherlock and Watson. I'm not as fond of them
A
as that.
writer, you say? Perhaps a competitor.
You're suggesting I have something to do with Agatha's disappearance. She was a very good friend, sir.
Why are you here?
Archibald has requested my help with the investigation because of my specialist knowledge.
I see. Well, you are both suspects.
Excuse me!
I believe you may have a motive, Mr. Doyle and Mr. Christie. As you know, it is so often the husband that is at fault.
That's only in stories. This is real life.
What right do you have to accuse me? You didn't know my wife.
And on the contrary,
Now, what right do you have to infiltrate this case? To crawl through my window and touch my belongings and act like you understand my world? What can you offer that Scotland Yard doesn't have? What resources have you?
With respect, sir, I have an intimate knowledge of your wife, one that other detectives could never understand, and one that you may never possess. And who is this woman?
That is Miss Charlotte Fisher, Agatha's secretary and our daughter's governess.
She spooks easy, I see. But perhaps this is a tactic, a ploy. She is a suspect as well.
A suspect? Charlotte. Wait, why, she's just a Dixie draught.
What is that in your hand, Mr. Christie?
A letter. Agatha wrote it to Charlotte the night before she disappeared.
Our first clue.
Excuse me, Mr. Burrow, but who are you to barge into this investigation and take over so many a search? It's no avail.
But I am the brightest detective to ever live.
Oh, is that true?
Sounds like fiction to me.
And why would we hand over our precious evidence to this this ninny?
Because unlike the countless others that have tried, I can actually find your wife. I am certain that she is alive, and I would like to save her before her corpse turns up. Now, if you do not mind, Mr. Christie, if I could examine the contents of the letter in your hand.
It's nothing.
Let him give it a go, Arthur. Things can't get worse after all.
Are you out of your mind?
Perhaps I am.
Dear Charlotte, please cancel my reservation at Yorkshire. My plans for this weekend have changed, and I have decided to visit Nan in London. Who is this Nan?
Nan Pollock. Agatha and Nan have been friends since they were schoolgirls at Devon.
And I presume you've checked in with this Nan?
Do you take me for a fool?
Okay, what did she say?
Agatha never turned up at Nan's. Got stuck on the way, I suppose.
Peculiar. I fear I will not return until tomorrow afternoon, so please make sure that the house remains spick and tidy. I'm sorry to leave you with a house full of dirty dishes, but I feel that if I stayed in this house for 1 second longer, I may croak. Archie has driven me mad.
Well, there's not much information in that letter. Am I right, detective?
Actually, there was quite a bit. A house full of dirty dishes indicates neglect. Is Mrs. Christie a neglectful person, Mr. Christie?
Well, not particularly. Though I suppose she could get a bit caught up in her writing from time to time.
Ah, Miss Fisher, I presume.
I'm terribly sorry. I must have fallen. I've just been so skittish.
My name is Detective Hercule Poirot. I would like to inform you that you are a current suspect in the case of the missing Agatha Christie.
I'm a suspect? Who am I up against?
That's right, the man in this room.
How dare you just lie?
Miss Fisher, where were you on the night of December 4th?
I was in London visiting my sister.
And when did you
The
return?
next morning.
When you found this letter?
Yes, Mrs. Christie left.
Mr. Christie, do you have any response to this letter?
Not particularly.
Well, you are mentioned, you realize?
Yes, Aggie and I, we had a brief argument before she left, that's all.
Ah, And what, pray tell, was this argument about?
Some daft quarrel about frivolous spending.
Your frivolous spending?
I have an expensive love of liquor.
And this made Mrs. Christie angry.
Oh yes, she always scolds me.
Angered her enough to leave, perhaps.
No, sir. On the contrary, this letter proves that I had nothing at all to do with her disappearance. Clearly, she intended on returning. Something must have gone wrong.
And why is it that you think she left in the first place?
Well, Agatha was prone to fits of hysteria. Perhaps she was suffering a nervous breakdown.
Of course. And what do you think would have caused this, how did you put it, hysteria?
Agatha had an active imagination.
It's quite a matter.
Really?
She's a writer after all. We're predisposed to daydreams.
I figure she might have gotten lost in her own mind, some kind of psychosis.
That is an interesting theory, Mr. Christie. I, however, am averse to believing that women just descend into fits of madness unless otherwise provoked. Now, did Agatha leave any other letters?
No.
Mr. Doyle, if you do not mind, I'll make a rundown of all the other evidence we have found thus far. I trust you are aware of all that has been discovered.
Of course. 2 days following her disappearance, Agatha's car was found abandoned near Guildford, on the edge of a chalk pit.
Where exactly?
Newland's Corner?
That's near Silent Pools.
Yes.
Are you aware that in August of this year, 2 children drowned in that spring?
What?
Perhaps the spot was chosen for a reason.
What are you suggesting, Perot?
Well, suppose she knew of the drowned children. Silent Pools has somewhat of a reputation. It is a symbol of death in this part of England.
It was not a suicide.
It is bottomless, they say.
You think she's dead?
I'm quite sure she is not, Mr. Christie. You see, I read about a case on an island off the Devon coast where there were 10 presumed murders, but only 9 bodies. The 10th was a murderer. He got away. If Mrs. Christie was dead, there would have been a body. I meant to save her before her death.
So what does this mean?
What this may implicate is a false incrimination. Suppose someone knew of the reputation of Silent Pools and chose the spot to fake a death.
This surely is sinister.
Continue, Mr. Doyle.
The police, they searched the area between Star's house and Agatha's car. They found bottles labeled poison, lead, opium, the fragments of a torn up postcard, a fur-lined woman's coat, a box of face powder, the end of a loaf of bread, a cardboard box, and 2 children's books.
Useless clues, all of them.
Not quite. Did Mrs. Christie have any knowledge of medicine or dispensary?
Oh, yes, she volunteered as a nurse during the war.
Yes, this may explain the opium bottles. It is a recreational drug, perhaps, but the coat, this seems grim to me.
How so?
December on the countryside is formidable. She may freeze without a coat. And the postcard, she must have been planning on mailing it, but to whom?
Perhaps to Rosalind.
Then why tear her to pieces? Only time will tell, I suppose. The face powder for vanity, the loaf of bread for a snack, the children's books.
Stinky the cat and Lumpy's terrible secret.
Perhaps a reminder of Rosalind.
Rosalind isn't particularly fond of Lumpy.
Miss Fisher.
I'm sorry. Do I speak out of turn?
No, not at all. I've only just noticed you're wearing quite a nice pendant. It's pearl, I see.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Perhaps too beautiful for a girl on your salary.
My salary?
Well, I presume you make 30 pounds. A jewel like that would cost at least half.
Well, Mrs. Christie left it for me.
I see it.
Yes.
I didn't know about the pendant.
It was Mrs. Christie's, but I suppose she grew tired of it because she left it for me a few nights before she vanished. I was always fond of it, but I assumed it would go to Rosalind.
Are you aware that there was an engraving on the back?
I suppose I never noticed.
12, 4, 19, 2, 6.
What do you suppose this means?
12, 4, 19, 2, 6.
password for the safe, perhaps?
No, it's too many numbers.
Perhaps an address, or maybe a secret clubhouse or speakeasy for mystery writers.
Oh, I assure you, if there was such a thing, I'd be the president.
Perhaps it lines the letters of the alphabet.
Ah, yes, Miss Fisher. To spell Agatha.
That's gibberish.
Well, perhaps it's 12/4/1926.
12/4/1926.
Goodness.
Why that's no better?
Gentlemen, it's a date.
A date?
A date?
The date, in fact, that Mrs. Christie vanished.
That's far too obvious.
No, not obvious. It's deliberate.
Deliberate? Preposterous.
Well, there's nothing more deceptive than an obvious
Oh,
fact.
Mr. Doyle, Mr. Christie, don't you see? Someone is leaving a trail for us to follow.
It couldn't be.
Well, either that or someone got the date inscribed following the disappearance, but my money is on form.
But who would do such a thing? Someone who wants to be found.
It is often that wicked bastards wish to be exposed. Recognize them. Well, they are evil.
Do you think she was taken then?
Whether she was taken or she left of her own volition. Whether she was taken or she left of her own volition, this I cannot say. But one thing is for sure. She has left us a riddle that we must unravel.
She didn't leave.
Why not?
Well, a number of reasons. Take her success, for one. The murder of Roger Ackroyd is a household name.
That is quite a case, and can you believe
Oh,
that
no, please don't
conclusion?
spoil it, Miss Bro. I haven't finished again.
Of course. This is her sixth novel, yes? Perhaps after one writes a number of books, the public loses interest.
Not in my case.
This is only speculation, of course, but perhaps Mrs. Christie was posing a publicity exploit.
It wasn't for publicity. As I've said, she's marvelously famous.
Well, perhaps she grew weary of the fame.
Crow is right. There's no reason she could have left.
Well, what about a manuscript?
Manuscript.
Oh, yes, she's writing another novel. The Mystery of Missing Mistress.
Oh, that is quite a title.
Alliteration happens to be one of my favorite forms of language.
She had just she's got to go back to get it.
She's right. Nothing's more important to Agatha than her story.
Well-
She wouldn't have left behind an unfinished manuscript.
Merci.
It's quite private, Poirot.
Well, I will not divulge any of its secrets, I assure you. I'm a man of honor after all. I would simply like to examine it to find any lingering clues and perhaps to see for myself that she did not simply leave.
All right. Charlotte, would you go and get it, please?
Of course, Mr. Christie.
Now, with a plethora of confusing evidence, let us move on to the suspects. We'll start with you, Mr. Doyle. Where were you on the night of December 4th?
I was competing in an amateur billiards competition in Sussex.
Billiards.
I'm quite good.
Ah.
Now that I'm getting older, I can't play cricket or compete in boxing anymore. It's hard on the joints, but I like to keep up my sporting somehow. Yeah, I'm a beast with a cue stick.
And those that were there could vouch for you, I suppose.
Indeed.
Strong motive, a competitor on a literary field, and yet strong alibi.
Agatha was a very good friend, sir. And besides, I have no reason to sabotage her success. My novels are bestsellers.
Oh, yes. Perhaps. But I must admit, I had quite hoped you would turn up guilty. You see, I quite dislike you, Mr. Doyle.
I found the manuscript.
Ah, thank you, Miss Bishop.
I want you to know, Mr. Perot, that I love Mrs. Christie. Agatha was my dearest friend, and I'm so lonely without her. I'm so dreadfully unhappy. I feel as if I may burst out.
One question yet remains. Why did Mrs. Christie leave in the first place if the disagreement was really nothing?
Why must she have a reason? Women are naturally secretive. Deceptive.
She was a mother, Mr. Doyle. She would not leave an innocent child to fend for herself.
I'm quite capable of governess, Mr. Perot.
Perhaps she just needed a break.
She would have seen the papers by now. She would have returned if that were the case.
What are you suggesting?
Mrs. Christie left you a letter the day she vanished.
Yes.
In it, she mentions an argument between herself and her husband. Do you remember what it was?
I remember the yelling at Woke Rosalind.
Do you remember what was said?
I try not to listen when Mr. and Mrs. Christie argue. It isn't like.
That's right, Charlotte.
Do they argue often?
Frequently, yes.
Good, Charlotte.
I have to go check on those.
Well, that brings us to you, Mr. Christie.
I had nothing to do with Agatha's vanishing.
Oh, you seem ever so confident, Mr. Christie.
I love her. It was a lover's squabble.
Lovers. And you're certain that Mrs. Christie loved you.
She was my wife.
And the wife must love her husband.
That's generally what marriage entails, yes.
May I ask you a question, Mr. Christie?
Of course, detective.
Why are you so desperate to find Agatha?
Once again, she's my wife.
Oh, yes, sure, but could there be any other reason?
What do you imply, Poirot?
What is it that you do, Mr. Christie?
I am a colonel.
Just as I thought. You see, you have not been completely truthful with me, Mr. Christie.
Sorry.
Your disagreement with Agatha was not merely about finances.
What makes you think that?
Oh, well, look around you, Mr. Christie. You live in a large countryside home, almost 400 acres. Your walls are lined with books. Oh, is that an original Degas, I see?
Yes, I am
Oh,
quite
you
proud
are a
of
colonel. Without even mentioning your wife's success, you have no monetary issues whatsoever. Perhaps you should have chosen a less obvious lie when you decided to tell me that your tiff was merely about frivolous spending.
No, Poirot, you misunderstood
What
me.
was the disagreement between Mrs. Christie and yourself?
It was...
For the sake of the case, I urge you to reveal what you're hiding.
Stop pressing me.
Tell me the truth, Mr. Christie. I demand to know.
Why does it matter to you, you depraved dick?
My job is to solve cases, Mr. Christie.
You won't find her.
Are you sure about that?
Countless have tried, and a dozen bloodhounds have tracked her scent.
Might I add, you seem ever so calm about the matter.
I don't need you here anymore, you dodgy muppet!
I have showed you do.
I've got it handled, Peru. Now don't upset Archie.
Mr. Doyle, you have no investigative skills whatsoever. Your skills lie in creation, in fiction.
Excuse me.
While I understand that my frank style of questioning might be frustrating to a man of your stature, one to which no one has ever spoken down, let me be perfectly clear. I will not leave this house until I receive the information I need to solve this case and find your wife. In the end, either through lie or through truth, people give themselves up eventually. Now I ask you this, Mr. Christie. Why are you so hasty to get rid of me?
I am not.
Perhaps you wanted your wife to vanish. Perhaps you willed it.
You hot-headed mud, breathe off!
I cannot leave.
Then I'll remove you by force.
I cannot leave.
Leave my house this instant!
I cannot leave. I said I cannot.
You better go, Perel!
I cannot leave. It is a matter of life or death.
Perhaps she's dead already.
She is not dead. She is not dead. I know this for a fact.
How do you know?
Because
How do you know? Why are you here?
she created me.
What?
I told you I cannot leave.
You cannot.
If I leave, I fail. And if I fail, I die.
I'm not sure I understand.
Mr. Doyle understands, don't you, Mr. Doyle?
I don't believe I.
Without you, Mr. Sherlock Holmes could not exist. Without Mrs. Agatha Christie, I could not exist either.
Say.
I cannot leave this house until I solve this case. If she dies, I die.
She will not die.
No, she will not. I will make sure of it, because if I don't, it is my duty, my responsibility as Detective Hercule Poirot.
If you fail, you die.
Now, there is something that I do not think you can quite understand, Mr. Doyle, and you neither, Mr. Christie.
What is that then?
If Agatha is to die, who is to speak? If she cannot write, what will become of her legacy?
And you? What have you got to do with it?
Why, I am but a small figment of her wildly marvelous imagination, but I must speak for her while she is gone. I must prevent her extinction by bringing my insight into seemingly impossible situations. I must be her voice while she is voiceless, her body while she is lifeless.
I don't want her to go lifeless. That's not what I... Oh.
Do you want your wife to disappear forever, Mr. Christie? Do you?
I did lie. She wrote me a letter too.
Why did you keep this from me?
Because it has no relevance to
Show it
the...
to me. Nancy,
Nancy Neal, she's my...
your mistress. I see. Nancy Neal. Perhaps I should interview this Nancy Neal.
She has nothing to do with this, Poirot, please!
Do you know where she was on the
She was
night?
with me! I left Rosalind asleep and we went to the Savoy and...
Why did you lie, Mr. Christie?
I had nothing to do with Agatha's disappearance, nothing at all. Now, I kept this letter secret because it implicates my guilt, but I promise that I...
Do you love this Miss Neal?
I believe I might.
You have mistreated her, Agatha. This is undeniable.
I didn't mean...
Perhaps you organized a kidnapping of sorts. A way to rid yourself of her burden, a way to live out a life with this Nancy.
No, I would do no such thing!
I do not believe that evidence to be an immediate indictment. I would need something more. But I think it may prove that Agatha left of her own volition.
She would never do that. She loves Rosalind.
I need something more to be sure, but I fear she is gone for good.
I've got it.
You have driven her away, Mr. Christie.
No, it couldn't be. It isn't
You
true.
are to blame.
Detective Hercule Poirot, Constable Christie, this is Madame Marilyn Egg.
Yes. Yes. I can feel it. Something foul has occurred.
Madam Egg.
My expertise lies in communing with the dead, in psychic understanding, spirit mediumship.
For she is madder than a bag of ferrets.
Meg is quite professional, I assure you.
We must cleanse this house of all evil energy.
You see, just last week Madame Egg spoke to my grandfather Tom, and you should have seen the horrible bond.
Oh, yes, quite a restless spiritual job.
And the chills as well.
Oh, I seem to remember it being quite cold last week.
This is absolute malarkey.
I assure you, Mr. Poirot, the existence of spirits is tangible. Close-minded men like you are those on the side of evil.
Whoa. Of course, Madam Egg.
Agatha was quite fascinated with mediumship.
Was she?
Was she?
Oh, you didn't know, was she? Why, she asked for my recommendation just days before she left. And of course, I highly endorsed Madame Egg.
Yes, sir. This case is of the utmost importance. When Aggie visited, I saw dark shadows in her tea leaves.
She came to see you.
Oh, yes. Friday before last.
I had no idea.
Madam Egg, if you do not mind,
Oh,
I'd like to
now
ask...
where is
Okay.
that glove, Arthur?
I'd quite forgotten. Do you have a glove of Agatha's, Archie?
Oh, yes. Right here, in fact.
Yes, there is an energy about these gloves. Yes.
We must have a seance! Mr. Christie, are there any candles? And perhaps charcoal and
I believe I have some crystal glasses. Will that do?
Bet anything you've got.
Help me, Arthur.
Madam Meg, if you do not mind,
You have a strange vivacity in your spirit.
I do not mean to offend Madam Meg, but I have no taste for your art.
You seem to ripple with vibrancy. I can read you like a book.
Madam Meg, why did Mrs. Christie come to see you Friday before last?
May I touch you, Mr. Perot?
What? No!
Your spirit is like no human I've ever seen.
You've got what you asked for, Madam Meg.
Oh, wonderful. Awesome.
Gentlemen, if you will excuse us, Madam Meg still has to answer some of my questions.
Goodness, Mr. Perot, what is your obsession with questions?
That is my job, Madam Meg. I answer questions. I answer unanswerable questions. What you do only causes more.
Perhaps some questions are best left unanswered.
Madam Meg, please. What was the conversation that was had between yourself and Mrs. Christie Friday before last?
Well, she unexpectedly woke me around 8 o'clock.
Unexpectedly?
Yes. I mean, I predicted it, of course. Yes, of course. What I mean to say is that the whole visit was quite unusual.
How so?
Well, you see, Abby asked me the questions.
You?
She refused any of my services, tarot, palm reading, even crystal healing, until the tea leaves. I saw a true and deep darkness in her leaves. Undeniable sorrow.
Madam Meg,
Yes, dear.
do you believe that Agatha's spirit would be peaceful?
Something troubling you?
No, perfectly sound.
I assure you, if she is ill at ease or angry in any way, we shall know soon enough.
Madam Meg, what sort of questions did Mrs. Christie ask you?
Oh, simply about my craft and the fabric of my headscarf.
Headscarf?
Now, let us get in with the spirits!
If you will excuse me, Madam Meg, I have evidence to sift through.
Stay close, Mr. Perot.
What should we do, Madam Meg?
Hold hands. Close your eyes. Feel the energy in each other and the spark of the spirit surrounding.
I don't feel anything.
Archie's palm's quite sweaty.
We must wait. Oh, then try not to breathe too loudly. You'll disrupt the spirits.
I've got to deviate it, that.
Really? How's that?
Don't curse me, you mumblecraft.
Oh, mon Dieu!
Poirot, what is it?
Hey, you've broken the circle! Now the spirits have escaped.
I've got it!
What?
Archie, get Charlotte.
Why?
Down, get Charlotte! Now, listen close, for it is quite unbelievable.
Well, the unbelievable is sometimes the most truthful.
Oh, hush. Now, I was right about her leaving us a trail, but it certainly was not on purpose.
Perot, what do you mean?
She's written her own mystery.
Can you call?
Miss Fisher, please take a seat. Archibald Christie, Arthur Conan Doyle, Charlotte Fisher, and Madame Marilyn Egg. All of you are culpable in the disappearance of Agatha Christie.
Sorry.
The missing car, the letters, the opium bottles, it's all here.
What are you on about, you wanker?
The mystery of Missing Mistress.
That's quite the title.
However unintended, Agatha has written her own disappearance, and all of you, regardless of intent, are to blame.
Poirot, you sound absolutely mad.
In her most recent mystery, Agatha's young protagonist is taken on her way to visit a friend with a young daughter. The abandoned children's books. Her car breaks down near Silent Woods and she is taken by a ruffian from her vehicle without even time to put on her coat. He uses opium to sedate her. Okay, on the way, she was planning on mailing a postcard addressed to one Miss Nancy Neal. While we cannot be sure of its contents, we can assume that she was planning on confronting your mistress, Mr. Christie.
What have we got to do with this, Pearl?
Oh, well, you've got everything to do with it, Mr. Doyle. You see, while her captor is fictional, her circumstances are not.
Won't you explain, Poirot?
As I know, solving a case while trapped on the Orient Express. Often, there is more than one guilty party.
Well, get on with it then.
Well, we will start with you, Mr. Christie, for you are most at fault.
My guilt becomes me.
As I have recently learned, you have been embarking on a romantic affair, and while I cannot be sure of the relationship itself, it is clear that your capricious behavior was affecting Mrs. Christie psychologically. You see, her young heroine, who incidentally vanished, was trapped in a loveless marriage, plagued with drunken arguments and infidelity. You see, you drove her away, Mr. Christie. You inspired her.
I am well aware of my transgressions, Mr. Poirot. Why don't we move on?
Well, let us proceed to Mr. Doyle.
Sure, you have nothing to do with Agatha's vanishing.
Au contraire, Mr. Doyle. Why, you are her greatest competitor. She is constantly nipping at the heels of your success. You felt threatened.
As I said, Agatha was a very good friend.
Perhaps, but this did not dissuade you from writing a negative review on her recent, how did you describe it? Atrocity. The murder of Roger.
I only suggested to an
And you asserted that perhaps her greatest creation, Detective Hercule Poirot, ought to be killed off. Am I wrong?
How did you know about that?
I noticed the headline on the paper as I walked in. I only pieced it all together when you mentioned your unfortunate ailment.
My ailment?
Your deviated septum.
What's that got to do with this?
Few use the phrase "buddy naughty" with as much regularity as you. You used it to describe the story of your condition and Roger Ackroyd.
You scoundrel. I thought I was sly.
I assure you, Mr. Doyle, Mrs. Christie is here to stay. One poor review will not tarnish her legacy. Hers will outlive yours. Now, in her recent tale, Mrs. Christie's heroine is forced to deal with a bombardment of criticism facing her recent poetry anthology. Now, of course, Mrs. Christie was nowhere near bombarded, but perhaps she drew inspiration from one particular negative review, a review written by a supposed friend. You have driven her mad with insecurity. She feels inadequate despite her obvious genius. And to make matters far worse, you send her to one Madame Egg.
Why, that's me, isn't it?
She wanted inspiration for her character. She wanted to learn about mediumship.
And you, Madame Egg, are responsible for inciting in her a deep and deprecating fear, while you told her of some untenable wickedness, some non-existent shadow.
No, I've never known Agatha to be a particularly spiritual person.
Perhaps, yes, but her visit with Madame Egg provoked a deep-rooted fear of failure and abandonment. And after her husband's refusal of love and support and a purported friend's betrayal, she was frail, her confidence thin.
I only predicted the future.
Ah.
I only told her the clear and untainted truth.
Of which I suppose the dead told you.
My God.
Of course. Madame Egg, you are a fraud. And your lying has only made the situation more beastly.
Fraud! Why, I won't stand for such accusations!
And that brings us to Miss Fisher. Sweet young Charlotte.
Agatha was my best friend.
Precisely.
Won't you explain?
I believe you stole that pendant.
I didn't! I swear it!
No, intentional, of course. You found it, it was on the dining room table in a purple velvet box.
Yes,
Yes, just as it was written. And either you assumed that it was meant for you, or you took it from its true owner because you wanted to believe it was meant for you.
Believe.
You see, I noted the following truth after reading Mrs. Christie's manuscript. You see, in her version of events, the pendant is not engraved. This means someone got the date inscribed following the disappearance. Miss Fisher?
I thought she'd been killed. I wanted to remember the anniversary of her death.
Charlotte, why would you want the pendant in the first place?
Because, Mr. Christie, Miss Fisher is in love with Mrs. Christie.
What?
It's true. I'm so sorry, Mr. Christie. I meant to keep it a secret. I never wanted anyone to know. It's just, Mrs. Christie is so kind to me. And I've never known real affection. And
That's enough, Charlotte.
I miss her so painfully. I just wish she'd return.
When she most needed your friendship, you denied it, blinded by an unattainable love.
I'm sorry, Mr. Christie. I'm sorry.
You see, you could not offer Mrs. Christie emotional solace for her marital woes because you could not care less about her and Mr. Christie separated.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Christie. I'm sorry. Archie is such a wanky, plug, ugly ass nigger!
Hey, settle down now, Miss Fisher.
I'm sorry. Really, I am.
I've come to the following conclusions on my own, but it is all here, written down.
Written down.
Each clue the same, the crust of bread, the letters, the unfortunately named children's books. It's all here in a dainty little manuscript.
And I see.
Of course. It's all there, can't you see? She's written her own disappearance.
You mean to tell me that Agatha wrote her own vanishing?
That's precisely what I've been trying to tell you, Mr. Doyle. With the help of the four of you. And perhaps more. That's for myself. I am as much to blame as the rest of you.
Why?
You see, for Mrs. Christie to return, I must leave. The story must end.
And how does it end?
Agatha must regain her voice. I've got to let her regain autonomy over herself and her imagination. She must be the writer she was meant to be without the influences of the four of you. She must be freed.
Where will you go, Mr. Perot?
Huh. I am not quite sure. Into the pages of oblivion, I suppose. But I will surely return when I am needed.
Mr. Poirot, the story hasn't ended.
As I have told you, the mistress in the novel is unnamed, but the clues are the same. She's written it herself.
What happens next?
The story is unfinished. That is why we have no answers.
You cannot leave until the mystery is solved. That's what you yourself
But the
proclaimed.
story stops, Mr. Christie. The mistress has been flung out of her home in a flurry of emotions. The young protagonist driven off towards her inevitable death.
But how do we get her to return?
I'm not sure you can.
She isn't dead yet. She's still alive.
She isn't answering our spiritual calls.
We must finish her story.
Intriguing.
Got to write an ending. One where the mistress does not die, where she reconciles with her childish friends and separates from her atrocious husband.
Yes, right, her return.
Perhaps this is it. Perhaps this is the answer.
Certainly worth a try.
Mr. Doyle, you are the writer among us. You must write our heroine out of this jam.
I wouldn't know how to finish Agatha's work.
You've got to try, Arthur. You've got to try.
All right. Have you got a fountain pen?
What are you writing?
Let them write.
do hope it's an exciting ending.
Agatha's endings never bore.
I'm sorry I lied.
It was only to your own detriment, so.
Yes, I fear she might have left because of me.
Perhaps you do not love her anymore, Mr. Christie. Perhaps it is time to let her go.
Perhaps I shall. It is me who should have left.
Agatha has created something beautiful. I am one of many, but I feel the power of her words. Perhaps she had to leave in order to maintain our independence as a creator. Perhaps you are simply a hindrance.
Yes, perhaps.
And I refuse to die for a man who has fallen out of love with a woman of such genius. I refuse to suffer the consequences of your mistakes. You see, the end to this case means I get to keep on living, solving cases. I get to be Detective Hercule Poirot because of one Agatha Christie. And this has been my greatest case yet.
And as she fled, the soft wind blowing against her cheek, no remnants of the ache of betrayal that had held her just minutes ago, she felt free. Free from a passionless life of burden and control. Free from herself, an overflowing mind that caused her own entrapment. And free to be artist she was meant. She approached the growing country home she'd known for nearly 2 years. She knocked on the door.